Welcome to Foxfire Focus, the podcast that brings clarity and insight to the industry's most relevant issues. Foxfire's mission is to provide the best service experience in eye care. So, we hope you enjoy what you're about to hear and that this information provides some perspective on the exciting opportunities facing our profession. For more information about Foxfire, please visit us at foxfiresg.com. Foxfire, taking care of your practice so you can manage your patients.
Hi there, Tim Nichols again with Foxfire Focus. Tonight, my guest is Sam Pierce. Sam's the 97th AOA president. He was president from 2018 to 2019, and I was privileged to be there when he was inaugurated. I have to say, Sam, he made us all proud.
Well, thank you, Tim. And obviously you did your research. I didn't know I was the 97th president. So that was, thanks for letting me know.
Yes. Sam and I both went to UAB. I was a few years ahead of him. He's an 88 graduate. So been out in practice 30 plus years, seen a lot of changes. Sam, what are some of the biggest changes you've personally witnessed in your career?
Well, gosh, that's a great question. I know, when I went into optometry school, there was virtually no commercial practice of optometry. There was a little bit. Yeah. There was always those isolated Pearl Visions and things like that. But then all of a sudden, even while we were in school, they started multiplying. We had like Royal Optical and OptiWorld and more retail oriented practices that really changed the profession. And then even now, there's two entities that employ 30% of the profession. And we know who they are, and that was just not anything I ever thought I'd see happen, and good or bad. I mean, number one, it gave a lot of doctors of optometry an opportunity to practice without the fear of trying to find the location and setting up a private practice and either being successful or failing, and then dealing with student loans. All at the same time, they were able to, step right into a career. They may not have loved it. It may not have been the ideal situation, but at least they were able to practice their profession and pay back their student loans and do pretty well. So that was a change that took place early on that I didn't see coming. I was very fortunate to be able to go into private practice. And then, a few years ago, you started seeing some practices consolidate. Never imagined things like that. And then even stranger than that, OD, MD practices. So you would have doctors of optometry working for or with ophthalmologists. And in some states, they could have a practice together. In other states, it was illegal, and one had to work for the other. And then in the late 90s, you were part of this in Alabama when we had a OD-owned referral center come into play. And those started showing up all over the country and have done very well and still do very well today. And then more recently, you've seen private equity start buying practices. And that's still ongoing. And you see that a fair amount. And more ODs can't sell their practice to people coming out of school for various reasons. And then they have the opportunity to sell to a private equity group, and it offers them the luxury of retiring differently, and usually much better off than they would have retired otherwise. It's a different circumstance for a lot of folks. But then a lot of folks resent private equity for the same reason they've resented the competition of corporate optometry and things like that. So the profession just looks different all the way across the horizon. And yet the opportunities are still there. So
all those changes have presented a lot of challenges, haven't they? I always have thought of optometrists like your classic optometrist that you and I remember when we were in school, was a very independent guy. He kind of had his own thing and he didn't really pal around with anybody else. He kept his nose to his grindstone, and it was hard to get optometry to be united about anything. Speak to that as far as one of the challenges of the AOA is trying to unite the profession under one umbrella.
Well, the AOA has always had one mission, and that is to advocate for the profession as well as for our patients. So, and that started well over 100 years ago when the AOA was started. Throughout the history of optometry, there have been threats to the profession, mainly from medicine, and then more specifically from ophthalmology. The turf battles are in every single state. When we finished optometry school, it was illegal for us to prescribe Opcon A or Nafcon A, which is now available over the counter.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, it went over the counter the same year we got our therapeutics bill in Alabama. So I've never, ever still to this day been able to prescribe Nafcon A. I can recommend it though, and prescribe a lot of other things. But it was interesting that, that's just one of the battles we've had. We've had to fight for everything we've ever had. I think at a greater level than any other profession has had to fight for scope advancement. We battled for the right to dilate our patients. Those were vicious battles. We fought for the right to, in addition to dilating our patients, to actually treat the diseases we were already diagnosing. And we fought those and with a variety of success. And by that, I mean, some states had formularies where they could only prescribe from a approved list of medications. And I think Florida still has to deal with a formulary, although it's a very generous formulary at this point. Nonetheless, there's a formulary. Yeah. You couldn't do oral medications. You could not do steroids. You couldn't treat glaucoma. So there's always been these restrictions, even when you had the ability to treat. And then, in 1998, Oklahoma, I think, forever changed the course of the profession when they passed legislation that allowed them to use lasers in the practices of optometry, including refractive surgery. And there are optometrists in Oklahoma that perform more PRK procedures than ophthalmologists doing refractive surgery. So that changed the profession. We've slowly started seeing more and more states. Right now, we're up to about 10 or 11 states that have therapeutic privileges. But the AOA, and now I'm getting back to your question, the AOA has always done what it could to support the profession in those state battles, but even further up with the at the federal level. Yeah. One of the biggest successes ever was when doctors of optometry in the late 80s were able to participate in Medicare. And that was a big, big deal. I mean, doctors of optometry took care of all these patients until the moment they needed cataract surgery, and then they never saw a patient again. And that went away when we could co-manage patients and be reimbursed by Medicare for professional services. So AOA was very instrumental in getting that legislation passed. And then in the regulatory arena, they've been active in the VA system with VA optometrists being able to practice at a much higher level, being called doctors rather than just ancillary healthcare professionals. So they're now treated much better and have better positions and better pay grades, and on and on. AOA was very instrumental in doctors being able to participate in the National Health Corps and have student loan debt forgiven. That came and then it went away for a while. Now it's on the verge of coming back. Yeah. But AOA, has always carried the flame for all these fights. And I've had the opportunity to talk to people and say, what's AOA done for me lately? What's my state association done for me lately? And I tell them, I said, are you still writing prescriptions? Are you still able to treat anything? Because the minute AOA closes its doors or state association closes its doors, those privileges will be gone in a heartbeat.
Yes.
We practice by the grace of a governor's signature. Mm-hmm. And all it takes is another piece of paper being signed by a governor that takes it all away. And if there's no one there to safeguard the profession, to fight for what we have and make sure it's not gone, it will go away.
That's true. Yeah, you jumped ahead to one of my questions, which was going to be, now, what do you say to someone who says, what are my AOA dues doing for me?
They're giving you the opportunity to practice.
Yeah.
That's what they do.
One of our Alabama optometrists commented back in the 80s when we did get the Medicare parity. He said, this pays my AOA dues for the rest of my life. He said,
absolutely.
One legislative change makes all the difference in the world. And having lived on both sides of that,
yes.
pre-Medicare parity and Medicare parity, it's a huge difference. Absolutely a game changer. So,
totally agree.
Yeah. Now, when you were president, you started AOA Future Practice Initiative.
I did.
And describe that for us. What's that about?
The Future Practice Initiative is a commitment AOA has made to the states to, over the next 10 years, starting in 2019. So, for the next 8 years, continuing on, invest up to $10 million in helping states fight for scope expansion. I mentioned 10 states currently have the ability to use lasers. And along with that are other surgical procedures that are very appropriate for doctors of optometry to perform, and injections and things like that. So the time has come when let me step back a little bit. Whenever there's been a major advance in the in the profession, when, for example, the ability to dilate, it started with a handful of states. Typically within 20 years, all states have that ability. Within 20 years of dilating, all states were dilating. Within 20 years of treating or prescribing therapeutics, within 20 years, all states had some form of therapeutic licensure. It was 98 when the first state got lasers. 20 years from then is 2018. We are a long way from all states having the ability for doctors to use lasers. And I saw that, and I was bothered by that. And I felt like the AOA could do more to help the profession at the state level with scope expansion. And in doing so, you've raised the bar of what it means to be a doctor of optometry. And now our fight is even better, in the federal arena, when we're talking about VA, Medicare, we're talking about a new game because now we're able to do a lot more. For example, in the pandemic, and doctors of optometry were authorized to actually give COVID vaccines if it got to the point where there was a shortage of providers. Optometrists were allowed to step up to the plate and give COVID vaccines in virtually every state, not every state, but the greater the expansion of scope, the greater the care you can provide your patients. It is a cost savings to Medicare, Medicaid, as well as third party, when you can treat things in your office same day rather than schedule another visit, another doctor, more tests performed. It's cost savings. Doctors of optometry have proven time and time again they can do the procedures just as safely and effectively as medicine, and in most cases, better.
Right.
They know the patients better, they're better prepared, they know how to do the post-operative care because they've been doing that all along. So I wanted to see the states move forward in a great way. And we went from just a handful of states now to 10, possibly 11, and with about 15 going for major scope expansion in the next year or two. So I think we're going to be very successful with that. And we're about to see the profession changed in a huge way across the country. Right. And look, Massachusetts got glaucoma. That was a big deal too.
Yes.
So now all 50 states, doctors of optometry can treat glaucoma.
Yeah.
So,
and California got so close.
They were so close. Yeah.
And who would have ever thought California would have eclipsed the other 40 states?
Right.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your current role with the AOA. You're right now chair of the AOA Excel program. And
correct.
If we're not familiar with that, tell us what AOA Excel does.
Well, first of all, AOA Excel is a separate entity from AOA, has its own separate board of directors. I chair that board. It is a for-profit corporation. It has one shareholder, AOA. So we help AOA maintain its nonprofit status. So because, at one point, everything was under the umbrella of AOA. And when you are a 501c corporation, you have to be very careful about your income, because if you are profitable, you can lose that nonprofit status. So this was a move taken several years ago to prevent that from happening. And a lot of the member benefits that generated non-dues revenue for AOA were moved over to AOA Excel. For example, the life insurance policies people could get through AOA, the professional liability, credit card terminals and things you use in your office, the merchant thing. I forget what it's called right now, but that's a lot of things like that. And so we've grown and expanded the program. And so when you think of member benefits, things you might need to be successful and thrive in your practice and make the practice work, you should always check with AOA and see what they have, because we've vetted every company, and we have endorsed business partners, which means we trust these people to do as good or better job than anybody else out there. And oftentimes it's at a savings. But just one example would be the professional liability insurance. As states gain scope expansion, one of the things you have to be concerned with is whether or not your professional liability policy covers you for those procedures you will do with expanded scope. You would be amazed at how many policies do not cover doctors of optometry for surgical procedures and surgical codes already. So, for example, you're doing punctal occlusion. A mishap occurs and there's a suit filed. You think, great, I have to turn this over to my professional liability or my malpractice insurance. And then they let you know, oh, by the way, you're not covered for any of that. You're only covered for things that happen, like slip and fall in the parking lot, or somebody's not happy with their glasses, or things like that. And you realize, oh, I should have had a better policy.
Right.
The AOA policy covers you for anything that your state board has deemed appropriate for you to do.
Yeah.
If your scope expands, you don't have to get a new policy. You don't have to get a new addendum. It expands with you. So that's just one example. The difference between AOA, professional liability insurance, and other policies, sometimes it's a few dollars a year more, sometimes it's a few dollars a year less. But I promise you, for what has to be pennies a day difference, there's no better policy than what AOA Excel provides through Lockton, who is our endorsed business partner for that. And it's one of the largest companies out there. And it actually covers more doctors of optometry than any other professional liability policy. But there's more than that. One of the latest things we've offered is the credit card for practice owners. And in fact, if you're an OD and you own any business, you qualify for the credit card. You don't have to just own a practice. You can own a real estate holding company. You can own a coffee shop. You can own, barbecue restaurant, trailer park, whatever you own, you qualify to get the credit card. The beauty of this is the business itself holds the liability for the card, and you personally do not have to guarantee the card, and your credit is not tapped for the card. So because it is truly a business card, if you meet certain spend limits within the first few months, that card will pay your AOA dues for the first year. So you talk about the value of membership.
Yeah.
There's one way to get your dues paid in just a few months. 2% cash back on all your purchases. There's just a lot of things, and the card's doing very well. I have it. I use it. It's great. And that's just one thing we have. Student loan refinancing, and products for students. Just a whole barrage, retirement planning, just a lot of things there. And the committee, the board of directors are all doctors of optometry at this point in various stages of practice, from retired to out of school, less than 2 or 3 years. So we have a good variety of folks with a lot of smart ideas, and we're always looking to expand the product and portfolio that AOA Excel has for our members.
Great. That's good to hear that put so succinctly. I hope our listeners are taking advantage of that. I know I use the AOA malpractice insurance, and always just felt good that I knew I was getting the best coverage that I could get. I didn't have to nickel and dime and worry about the price because it was
right. Yeah.
Sam, you've traveled a lot as part of your role, and you've been from in every state.
Most states, I think there's one, maybe 2 states I didn't make it to in my 11 years on the board.
Yeah.
So but I did make it to all the other states.
As you met a lot of people, and you've met tons and tons of people.
Yes.
Who are some of the real heroes in optometry that really stand out to you? People that you've met that just say, "Man, I'm standing in the shadow of a giant here."
Wow, that's a great question, David. Your name's not David. Sorry, let me back up. I'm thinking about who I'm going to say, and one of them's David Cockrell, and so I'm so sorry about that.
That's all right.
Yeah. So, but it's still a great question. I can limit it just to the the boards I've served on for 11 years, and other trustees and folks who became president of the AOA. And you talk about just giants in the profession and what they did, and their backgrounds is truly amazing. Like David Cockrell, who was instrumental in Oklahoma getting lasers back in 1998, and has been a stalwart for the profession. And I cannot think of anyone who's testified more on behalf of optometry in more state legislatures as they would have hearings on scope expansion than David Cockrell. So he would be at the top of my list. Joe Ellis was at the helm when we got dealt with, Obamacare. And AOA was instrumental in fighting to make sure we had a seat at the table, and we got more than we ever thought we were able to get. We were very successful. The children's eye benefit being included in the exchanges, and anything that came under the umbrella of the Affordable Care Act, optometry was able to participate. And Dr. Joe Ellis was at the helm, and look at what he's done in Kentucky, with scope expansion. And no one will fight harder for the profession. And right now, most recently, he was the chair of the AOA PAC committee, and PAC donations just about doubled under his leadership. So great guy there. One of the smartest doctors of optometry I've ever met is Christopher Quinn up in New Jersey. He was one of those that had a an Omni Center, OD run referral center in multi-states, New Jersey, New York. I think even in the maybe in the Philadelphia area, but I'm not sure where all they had locations. But very successful, published, very intelligent, did a tremendous job as president of the AOA. And it goes on and on. Others I met in the profession, it's very fortunate to me. Irvin Borish.
Yes.
And that was fascinating. And then those even not in the profession, just because of the things we did at Optometry's meeting. I met Buzz Aldrin, a guy who walked on the moon.
Yeah.
And just wow, amazing some of the folks we met for that. And it goes on and on. But those are a handful. Dr. Steve Loomis. I don't think there's a doctor of optometry out there that knows more about what goes on and how to get a bill passed in a state legislature than Steve Ellis. I mean, he chaired SGRC, State Government Relations Committee, for many years before he moved to the board, and was a phenomenal president and did a great job there. So, gosh, I could spend the rest of the night just thinking of different folks I've met, but and you've met a lot of them too. So
that's a good list. That's a good list. And you say there's so many that I wish we had time to talk about, but I probably kept you long enough. Sam, I really appreciate you being willing to talk to us, and thanks for what you have done, and thanks for what you continue to do for the profession. And
absolutely,
pleasure to have you. So, Foxfire Focus. Tune in again. Thank you, folks.